Hey guys, it's Mountain Walk, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about modern goblins. This, of course, being the post MH3 modern goblins. So, yeah, I came up with a pretty interesting, sweet deck list. Something I haven't really played yet, so this is all just theory crafting, but it is pretty sweet. I like it, and I attempt to solve a lot of the problems and issues I've had with the previous versions of modern goblins. So let's get to it. Okay, um, it's not great. It's not great. You know, the old version of goblins really just doesn't really work very well anymore, and arguably it's you could say maybe it never did, or at least never did enough. You know, not to the point where it was even sort of slightly played. And you know, I think there's a lot of issues which are sometimes, or somewhat, I should say, solved by new sideboard cards, but we'll get to that in a bit. There's just too much good removal to be playing expensive, unimpactful cards. Like you can play expensive stuff, but if they don't do anything really or require too many other good cards to make work, I mean, then you just have like another bad tribal deck, which there are many, right? That's most tribal decks and every format are just awful, right? So let's just cut out all the clunky weird stuff and the bad combos that are just like really pie in the sky kind of stuff, like just not happening. So unfortunately, that's the Snoop Kiki Harbinger combo. Like you can't draw your Kikis basically. Um, you know, or if you draw more, you know, if you draw one, you can't draw the other one. And of course, the Kikis themselves are awkward cards, even though they are powerful generally. Harbinger is just a bad card, and Snoop is good, but it's a little, um, it's awkward. It's a really awkward card because it's basically just a slightly harder to cast Grizzly Bear that doesn't really do that much. It's the floor can be super low on that card, and so that's not really what we wanna do. So yeah, we gotta really change things up, and so that's really what got me brainstorming. You know, especially since the old decks just had a lot higher of a curve. So I was thinking, you know what, let's just get that down a little bit. Let's just get it down. Okay, and now we've got, well, here's the list. We actually have more than 22 lands, of course, because we have the new MDFC Bogart Trawlers. That's basically 25 mana sources. Um, and yeah, I mean, this isn't going to look too strange to most people that have played Goblins in the last 5 years, or whether in Legacy or Modern or whatever. It's basically red black. You know, black sometimes for disruption, but generally black for all the powerful red black goblins and black goblins. And of course, we get a couple good new black goblins, which is pretty sweet. Um, Man base, nothing too interesting. We got one surveil land, which is pretty sweet. I think that's probably optimal. Any more is just like too much because the deck is super mana hungry. Tap lands are really problematic, but having a way to turn a turn where you have like an untapped fetch where you can't spend that last mana into like a surveil, either to surveil into like a good card into the graveyard for nightmare or something else, or get rid of a land. That's pretty powerful. So I think it'd be incorrect to run zero. Swamp is great. Bunch of basic mountains are great. You need those for against things like Harbinger, or of course even you don't want to get locked out by Blood Moon. But I think yeah, you don't really need something like Prismatic Vista for the most part. So because obviously Vista can fetch your basic swamp and mountain, whereas like your fetches can basically only four of them can get the swamp. Anyways, whatever. It's not really that important. That's pretty minutia. But we got the one Crater Maker just as a nod to Eldrazi. It's definitely a really powerful card to get against Eldrazi. So that's pretty sweet. Definitely very, very good against things like Thought-Knot Seer and like um, uh, Smasher. So it's good against those. Good against, you know, the big Eldrazi that aren't indestructible. Good against Karn. Just Crater Maker, pretty good. There's a lot of Eldrazi stuff going on. Goblins, historically, actually very, very good against Eldrazi, at least, traditionally, right? In Legacy, obviously, it's a very different situation here, but being able to gum up the board with garbage, like Modern War Marshal, is very good against those decks, and so is Munitions Expert, and this deck plays 4 Marshal, 4 Expert, and we can get a lot of them and do a lot of crazy stuff. So generally a pretty good matchup, but I figure it doesn't hurt to play another Crater Maker. Pretty sweet card anyways, good with Nightmare as well. So, or against Tron, you can kill Ugin or other Planeswalkers. Anyways, a ton of guys, because we want a whole bunch of stuff to go with Nightmare. Yeah, not much to say here, I don't think. I mean, the sideboard's up in the air. Again, we'll talk a little bit about that, but let's get into the new cards in the list. Okay, we got Nightmare. Obviously, that's what this deck is built around. It can basically recur anything the first time you cast it. Only the 2 Sling Gangs are not recurable. They have to do that the second time to recur them, but that's pretty sweet. So yeah, card's very good. I like it a lot. It lets you just get up a huge board, sacking all sorts of crap, sacking tokens to get back real things, and I mean, you just have so much good stuff. We have a lot of cards that synergize with all the sacrificing and stuff, which we'll get into a little bit later. War and Soul Trader produces extra black mana because it creates treasures for Chthonian Nightmare, so you can have bigger turns with more Chthonian Nightmare stuff. And the life loss can be offset with Sling Gang, of course, and as well just creating a big board with a whole lot of stuff, and sacking stuff for free is great. It's another, well, it's quote unquote sort of like Skirk Prospector, excuse me, 5 through 6, because it creates mana, but the mana sticks around. So this is pretty sweet. Definitely pretty powerful, and it's a 3 mana 3/3. So I mean that's if you aren't familiar with Goblins, that's actually a pretty good stat line. Trained Armadon, just, I mean, oh man, with like a relevant creature type, so good in this deck. Okay, and then of course we have Bogart Trawler, which is extremely good. This card is so good. Whereas we might have struggled with something like Flage, Trawler is just blip, just kills it immediately, and it can do it multiple times thanks to Nightmare. And of course, Trawler has text against things like Living End and so on and so forth. And that actually makes it a little bit trickier to figure out, like, okay, so how much graveyard hate do I need? Regardless, Trawler is great because it's a 3 mana 3/1, which is a great stat line, as I've kind of said earlier. The main deck graveyard hate on a Goblin body, so you can tutor it with Trawler. It has all the other Goblin synergies and stuff. I mean, that's, I don't say it's broken, but that's extremely good. Being able to hit Flage on turn 3 or 4 after they've dumped a bunch of crap in the graveyard and you've traded like 1 for 1 is just huge. Whereas like you would have to normally like build up a huge board and then expert it or something and yada yada yada. Trawler just takes care of that crap super duper fast. And it buys you a couple turns, and a couple turns with Nightmare, or even just this deck in general, will just let you explode. And of course, you know, the backside is being able to matron for another land, and a black land at that is actually really good, especially with something like Nightmare, which creates a heavier sort of black requirement in your deck than what would initially seem. And of course, Soul Trader, again, produces black mana with its treasures and stuff. So yeah, I mean, Trawler's great, so good, I love it. What a sweet card, great art, and of course I love Lorwyn. I love Lorwyn. Every year that passed, I love Lorwyn even more. Um, Half the reason I like Bloomburrow so much. Great cards and great flavor, great theme. Anyways, and of course Randy Gallegos, what a great artist. And Pete Venters for Soul Trader, I mean. And Josu Solano, who I've seen for the guy that did Chthonian Nightmare. I've seen his stuff recently too on other cards, although I can't remember. Anyways, too off topic, too much going off the trail. Let's get back to it. Okay, so these are the payoffs basically, and also the enablers for the Chthonian Nightmare and just doing goblin stuff as well. Pashlik Mons, stuff dies, you deal damage to stuff. So you can kill their stuff, you can ping them, really great. Obviously, Pashlik Mons, only downside, of course, is it's legendary, which we'll get to in a sec, but it also is great against Wraths as well, and even late game, it is a mana sink, which is really nice because sometimes you can get a lot of treasures in this deck. Pretty sweet. Sling Gang, this is kind of your finisher, also your stabilizer by turn 4, because if you get this or tutor for this by turn 4, you can throw it down. You don't have to worry about it getting exiled, or any of your stuff getting exiled, of course, because you can just sack it. You have so many sack outlets. It's so good. This card is just, I love Sling Gang. This card is sweet. This card is sweet. And of course, being able to recur it with Chthonian Nightmare is so good because you have so many extra card draw stuff and tutors, and having access to multiples of those with Nightmare is just, for so cheap too, that's a big game changer. And that's why I really like to focus on Nightmare, because it's so cheap. It's a little bit more harder to interact with because it's an enchantment. And speaking of enchantments, Bogart Shenanigans. I like this guy because it's still a goblin that you can tutor for, but it's a little bit more resilient to removal. So heat and galvanic discharge and push and all this other stuff, bolt, obviously, doesn't hit it, obviously, doesn't hit it. And it's great because so it just sits there and it just doubles up with Pashlik Mons, and it just deals a lot of damage. So it's great with your sacrifice stuff. You know, it prevents Wrath of the Skies from totally wrecking all your stuff. Well, I mean, it still dies to Wrath of the Skies, but it's like, if you have it and Pashlik Mons out, like, Wrath can just straight out kill them. So, yeah, really, really strong card. It's something I've obviously liked a lot in Commander, right? I played it a lot in Krenko, but here I was looking for, like, another, like, kind of like just a fifth Pashlik Mons, because having too many Pashlik Mons in your hands, they're just blanks, right? Bogart is kind of like a, you know, kind of like a Pashlik Mons, but a little bit different. And of course, Mog War Marshal. This is the card that kind of ties everything together with all like the sacrifice stuff, all the Chthonian Nightmare stuff, all the Goblin stuff, all the graveyard stuff. It puts itself in the graveyard if you don't pay the Echo. Although sometimes you pay the Echo, very rarely, but it does happen. Rarely, I should say. And it puts a lot of dudes into play when it comes into play and then dies. So it's great coming and going. It creates a huge, super big board, so it's good with a couple other cards we'll talk about. And then the more crap you have, it's more stuff to sack to Sling Gang, or even like late game, you can play a War Marshal and then sack it to Pashlik Mons and create like 8 million dudes, you know, which is just so good, and sack more tokens for more dudes and deal more damage. I mean, it's just so great. Wogmore, excuse me, it's like a mouthful. Mog War Marshal is just so good in this deck. I love it. Really, I don't want to say ties the room together, right? It's a little cliche. Oh, her. I'm referring to that movie. You remember the movie? Anyways, I like War Marshal. What a sweet card. And it's got sweet Wayne England artwork. Rest in peace. I believe he passed a while ago. A couple years ago. Many years ago, I believe. Anyways, let's get on to it. Okay, and this is what I was talking about earlier. What are the cards that really synergize with having a bunch of dudes on board? Of course, Munitions Expert. This card's so good. It's a goblin with flash that kills planeswalkers or creatures. It just deals a pile of damage, and this card is so good to recur. Just looping two experts. Oh, chef's kiss. Love it. Wait, maybe saying chef's kiss is kind of cringe. I should probably remove that. Like, I should say bussin', straight bussin'. That's right. Yeah, I got the broccoli hair, straight bussin', no cap. Okay, and Horde Master. This card is your secondary slash supplemental draw engine with Chthonian Nightmare, because well, anytime your stuff dies, you get exile a top card and you get to play it. So it's great again against Wraths, which Jeskai is really good, and so Wraths are really popular, whether Verdict or Wrath of the Skies, I should say. which this card is sweet against. And of course, it pumps all your dudes. You can go super wide. So like they have to rat your board to get rid of your stuff, but maybe they take a bunch of damage and then you exile a bunch of cards and get to play all the goblins next turn. I mean, it just does everything. And Jeskai Control is one of the more popular decks, and even after the Nadu banning, I imagine it'll still be very good because it's so. I mean, it's like a main deck Serenity that's better than Serenity somehow, or at least in most respects, I should say it's better than Serenity. Anyways, Horde Master, super, super good. Just good when your opponent's not doing anything. Good when you just have a bunch of stuff. Good when they are interacting with you. Unless, of course, it's exile, but you can still respond to the exile by sacking it if you have a sack outlet. So, yeah, Horde Master, just really, really good in this deck. And it's so much cheaper than some of the previous options. Okay. Oddly enough, I think probably one of the most uh, uncuttable cards, I guess, for lack of a better word, I should say, is Goblin Ringleader. Ringleader because you probably want a couple, one or two, maybe three. I have three in the working sort of sideboard, but one to two you probably want against something like the control decks. Because even after the Nadu ban, I imagine the Jeskai control decks will be as or more popular. And this card is just super, super great, obviously historically as well as just currently, I think. If you want to grind out a bunch of cards, this card is sweet. You have like 30 hits in the main deck. So yeah, this card just does everything you want it to. I love it a lot. It's super great. Like I said, I don't know if you want three, but this card is the best thing against, um, control decks, especially if like they somehow get a flage off and you need to like chump or sack or do the sort of grindy, sacky, try to get my stuff together goblin thing where like it looks like you're losing and then you just like have a big turn and you win. Especially if you have something like File in play, like Ringleader is pretty important for that. And so we have about the right amount of goblins, right? About 30 hits main deck. So Ringleader, very, very important, especially for more stuff like control decks and things like that. And just, I can imagine against something like the Necro decks, it might be pretty good too, which another deck that seems pretty solid. But let's talk about some new stuff. Flute and Bauble. Flute against things like Amulet Titan or other sort of decks that depend on one card, say like Scape Shift or whatever, things that you can't really interact with on the stack, and when they resolve, you kind of lose. Um, Ringleader, or excuse me, Ringleader, it's right next to Flute. Flute is very good against that stuff. So we really want Flute. Flute's super great. I like it a lot. It has flash. It's like kind of a pseudo null rod or damping sphere, kind of curse totem sort of effect, which is great. And or Python needle, I guess maybe that's the better comparison. And it just does so much, and so you definitely want some number of flutes, and you definitely want some number of baubles. Although again, I just don't know what. They're very cheap. It's very good. Bauble just stops no free stuff from being cast, which is great. And then of course I also had Thoughtseize. Thoughtseize is just a great versatile card. I don't know if I need it. Maybe the other more specific and or powerful combo hate is better, but Thoughtseize is just a generically good card, so it's not the worst thing to have in your sideboard, but maybe Bauble and Flute and more numbers serve better. And of course that applies to Chalice and so on, but Chalice isn't a new card, and so anyways, there's so much going on, there's so many moving pieces, and I haven't even played the deck, and the meta is going to be different now from what it is after, right? Nadu's banned, which is an inevitability. It's one of the, man, that card is so awful. Like, it's one thing to take a lot of time. It's another to like not even really even make sense or be playable online because there's no way to tell how many times you've targeted like your Nantuko tokens or whatever, the insect tokens. Like you don't even, whatever. Anyways, and of course Unlicensed Hearse. This is just sort of a stand-in for Graveyard Hate. Um, I don't think you really want to play Surgical or Leyline or something. Maybe Crypt or, well, my favorite, of course, is Relic. Relic's great, but Hearst is really good. Works with having some random crappy tokens, and then gives you graveyard hate for basically ever, and everything's a way slower, um, in uh, in modern. So it's just less opportunity cost of like not running Leyline. So yeah, Hearst is great, but again, it's just trying to find the right balance of these cards. So yeah, there you go. But that's it. That's it. Uh, as my good friend George would always say, uh, don't lick the envelope. That's what he would always say to me every time. I never knew why he said that, but that's what he always said. Anyways, guys, thanks for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this got your noggin jogging. I hope you like these ideas. I can't wait till Nadu's banned. I'll probably maybe even try and put this deck together in paper. So many cool cards and things going on. Yeah, just a real sweet deck. I love Goblins. So much fun. So anyways, guys, thanks for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed this, and have a nice day.